Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a good night. I am King Pigley. This is Gaming Imperfectly, and welcome to the channel. If you're new to the channel, I am King Pigley, and I hope you like what you see. Guys, life is certainly stranger than fiction at times. And today's story slash missing 411 case exemplifies that exact statement because it is super weird. Stick around because this one is going to blow your mind. In this missing 411 case, this particular person is found, but in a place they shouldn't be. Now, if you don't know what Missing 411 is, guys, it is a book series by a man named David Paulides. David Paulides was a police detective for many years, 30 plus years, and when he was done, when he retired from being a police officer, he went into writing books about missing people and missing person cases all around North America and the world. This case, the case of Lawrence Sullivan, is an old case. Now, this goes back to 1930, so it's a long time ago. But at the same time, you have to understand that the idea of the paranormal, the craze, the making up stuff, people didn't really do that in 1930. Their ideas and their sensibilities were far different than ours. And so it's easy for us to go, this is not real, or the reports are inaccurate. But back then, people were really kind of no-nonsense about this kind of thing, especially when it came to missing persons or missing children. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about today. Because usually I've been covering hunters with a missing 411, but today I'm going to cover a missing child's case, and that is the case of Lawrence Sullivan. Now, Lawrence Sullivan lived about 150 miles in a town called Manhattan, but it was 150 miles south of Reno, Nevada. He loved his uncle, John. And John Sullivan was a gold prospector. And one day, John came by his nephew's house, and he's, Uncle John, he wants to go with his Uncle John. Because John says, well, I got some errands to run. I'm going to ride around. I need to go check on a spot that I'm thinking about panning for gold at, that I'm thinking about prospecting at. And so Lawrence's parents were like, sure, John, help yourself. It's Uncle John. And Lawrence loves his Uncle John. So Lawrence Sullivan and John Sullivan get in John's truck and off they go. And John runs some errands and this, that, and the other. But then he drives out into the deserts. And when he gets out there, he has to go down this road. Eventually the road ends. He even has to go kind of off-road to get to where he's considering doing this prospecting at. And Lawrence is having a high time, hanging out with his uncle. Just absolutely loving life at this point in time. Now, this is in September, guys, so it's the fall, but we're also out west in a desert climate of Nevada, and so therefore, during the day, it's still getting very warm and fairly comfortable, but at night, the temperatures are dropping to zero at times, like even below zero in certain nights. It gets super cold out in the desert, no matter where you are. Whether it's the Sahara or the wherever. Pick a desert. It gets cold there in the evening. And so when they finally got out to where they were going to check on John's spot to see if he wants to prospect there, he tells Lawrence, just, hey, buddy, stay in the car, stay in the truck, and I'm going to go right over there, and I'm not going far. You'll be able to see me, and I'll be right back, but I want you to stay in the truck. Now, remember, guys, this is 1930. Okay, this isn't present day. This is a long time ago. Now, they are legitimately out in the middle of nowhere. Remember, they left the road to get to where John is thinking about prospecting. John gets out of his truck. He leaves Lawrence in the truck. He goes walking up this hill, and as he's walking up the hill and finally crests the ridge of this hill, he turns around, he looks at Lawrence. Lawrence and him make eye contact. And John waves at him, to let him know, hey, Lawrence, I'm right here, And Lawrence waves back at his Uncle John, just watching and waiting, just like John asked his nephew to. John says he crested the hill and went down on the other side for just a few minutes. In that time period, while he crested the hill and went over, he was just scanning the terrain. He said he was not over the top of this hill 5 minutes. Now, human perception of time may vary, guys. Maybe it was 10. Maybe it was 15. Maybe it was 20. We'll even go high. We'll say 30 minutes John stayed away from that truck. But when he crested the ridge to come back to his truck, the door of the truck was open and Lawrence was nowhere to be seen. Now, at first, John wasn't very worried because sometimes kids wander and sometimes kids don't listen. And so maybe Lawrence just decided to leave the truck. So it wasn't that big of a deal to John. But he started calling for him, yelling his name, looking around. And guys, this is the desert. So there is almost no tree cover out here. There's like no shrubs, no nothing. It's really rocky, barren terrain. And something else too important is to remember is where John had driven off of the main road and off road itself completely. The terrain was super rugged where he was thinking about prospecting. It was difficult terrain for an adult to move through. So again, when Lawrence wasn't in his vehicle, he thought, well, Lawrence couldn't have gotten far. I mean, he's a 3-year-old kid. How far can a 3-year-old kid get? So he's yelling and he's calling and he's looking and he looks under the truck. He looks in the back seat. He looks all over. No Lawrence. And after a few hours of looking, John gets really desperate. And he's like, I don't know what to do. And so he loves his nephew. As much as Lawrence loved his Uncle John loved his nephew Lawrence. And so he is really freaking out at this point in time. And he has to make a gut-wrenching decision whether or not to keep looking for Lawrence or to leave and go get help. Now, if he leaves, that means he is now leaving Lawrence out in the middle of the desert, and it's getting dark. I mean, the sun is setting, it's getting cold. Lawrence wasn't dressed for cold weather. What to do? But ultimately, John decides to go back into town and get help. He goes and gets the authorities immediately. They drive right back out there. The sheriff's department, some civilians, volunteers from the town, all these different people, including Lawrence's parents, they all come back out to the site where John said they had gone, and they start looking. Now, initially, what had happened is that they found Lawrence's tracks, and they kind of followed him for a little while, but then they disappeared. They looked all in the low-lying areas leading away from John's vehicle where he had parked it. Because the idea is that, like most human beings, a child particularly that's having, this is difficult and rough terrain, like super rugged terrain. Most people go downhill. All animals go to the least path of resistance. But as they looked downhill and they looked away from where it would have been easiest for this 3-year-old child, for Lawrence to go, there was no sign of him. Just off like random chance, one of the volunteers that was looking actually went uphill. And a mile away from where John had parked originally, they found little Lawrence's hat. Now, if you remember back to our Raymond Matlock case, they only found his hat as well. And in a lot of these missing 411 cases, they find like an item of clothing, but nothing else. And it's also really strange. There's his hat, but there's no signs of Lawrence. And so they shift the search, though. Instead of looking downhill, they shift the search over to where they found Lawrence's hat. And they search in a huge miles, guys, looking for this kid. And no sign of him. No tracks, no nothing. They bring in bloodhounds. The bloodhounds track him that way into a canyon. But once they get into the canyon, they lose the scent. They can't find Lawrence. So it's really driving these guys crazy. Now, this search, guys, has gone on for days at this point in time. It has gone on for days. And so the parents of Lawrence and John, his uncle, are really getting to the point where they don't know what to do. They are losing hope that they're going to find Lawrence alive. It's been days. He wasn't dressed. Several nights, it's gotten down to 0. That's freaking cold, guys. 32 degrees is freezing. 0 is awfully cold. Below 0 is, frigid temperatures. And here's this 3-year-old kid out there wandering around with very little clothing and no provisions. I mean, let's not forget, this is a desert. So during the day, hotter than the gates of Hades, and at night, it's colder than a well digger's ass. And how's this kid gonna survive? So there's really no hope of finding Lawrence alive, so everybody thinks. But considering how baffling it is, and since nobody has any clue, and since his tracks keep running out, they don't know what to do. And the sheriff is like, I'm going to go try to get some extra help. We need help on this. And the newspapers in town, after like the first 4 days of Lawrence missing, even started writing articles speculating that maybe even a giant bird, like an eagle, swooped down and carried Lawrence off. Who knows? But the sheriff wasn't necessarily buying that, and so what they decided to do was, because there's no blood. I mean, guys, you gotta understand, if an eagle has talons, if he grabs a hold of anything, it's going to puncture skin, it's going to leave blood. The same thing goes if a mountain lion or a coyote or something horrible that lives in the desert, so a predator, grabs this 3-year-old boy, even if there's no struggle because it overpowers him instantly, there's still going to be blood. There's still going to be a kill spot. There's going to be a consumption spot. And they're not finding anything to show predation of an animal type on this child. So the sheriff, when he said he was going to go get help, actually went to the local Indian reservation, the Native American reservation, and got a Native American tracker. And this guy, now you got to understand, this is, again, 1930, all right? The guy they got, the Native American they got, his father remembered Little Bighorn. You know what I'm saying? His grandfather remembers the coming of Europeans and the colonization of this country. And so when I say that he is a Native American tracker, what I mean is that this guy had exceptional skills, almost a lost art of his people back in a time before modern conveniences. And so hunting was a pretty big skill for Native Americans, as I'm sure you guys know. And so when you got a Native American tracker, this guy was an exceptional tracker, is what I'm trying to tell you. And so this Native American tracker went back to the site, and immediately he picked up a trail where other people could not. And sure enough, it's this kid's trail. He ends up following this trail for 7 miles, guys. 7 miles. He follows this trail, and it eventually leads to this mountain. And he starts heading up the mountain. This mountain's terrain was so rugged that adults could not climb it without the use of climbing gear. So they actually had to get ropes and rope up and really prepare for mountain climbing. I mean, it was this was a serious climb, to say the least. Okay, they went 1,400 feet. That's 500 meters, guys. 1,400 feet up a mountain, almost sheer face at times, and finally, on a rocky outcropping, barely wide enough to hold this child, they find Lawrence Sullivan. And he's alive, guys. The weird thing about it, though, is this tree, like a mahogany tree, an evergreen, there was an evergreen tree that was growing off the side of this mountain, off the side of this ledge. And the branch of this tree, the bough of this tree, because, evergreens are really flimsy in Alaska. And it wasn't a huge tree. I mean, it was like a sapling of a mahogany. But it had been bowed and bent across this child, kind of locking him in position. The sheriff, according to his statement, said it almost looked like the kid was in a yoke for an oxen. Those big things that they put around a ox's neck to pull a cart, or he even said it looked like he was placed there, like in a trap. But the branch of this tree was actually holding this child in place. And so it kept him from falling off the ledge. However, again, the sheriff said that if the kid would have moved suddenly, it could have even broken his neck the way this branch was wrapped around this kid. But none of this is the point. They got the kid down. Lawrence Sullivan is very much alive, and he went on to live a very long life. But here's the weird part to this, guys. How does a 3-year-old child go through completely rugged terrain that they need grown men have trouble doing it? Animals, dogs give up on going certain ways. And then most weird of all, like when Lawrence got out of the vehicle, if he did get himself out of the vehicle, his uncle was right on the other side of that ridge. And most children, if they're curious about the adult disappeared, would go to the adult. He knew which way his uncle had went. So why wander off in a whole totally different direction? And again, how in the heck did Lawrence Sullivan get 1,400 feet to a rocky outcropping and then get pinned down by a tree? And the strangest of it all, guys, is that Lawrence was missing by the time they found him a total of 7 days. So how did Lawrence Sullivan survive out in the deserts of Nevada in zero temperatures, in below freezing temperatures during the night, and 190-degree temperatures during the day without food, water, shelter, or proper clothing? I have no idea, but I tell you what I'd love to do. I'd love to hear your opinion on what you think happened to Lawrence Sullivan. Guys, if you're interested in David Paulides' books and stuff, I'm leaving a link in the description below. You can look into these cases yourself as well. Just Google them. You know, I'm just reading the cases. I'm reading them how they're presented. And I tell you, this one is freaking weird. Now, we may never know how Lawrence Sullivan got to the top of that rocky ledge, but we can speculate all day long. Again, giant bird, mysterious, I don't know, otherworldly, or is there a rational explanation? Leave me something in the comment section below. But that's it for King Pigley today. Thank you so much for being here, guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. It means everything to me. And if you are new to the channel and you've been here this long, I surely hope you'll consider subscribing. Keep coming back, hanging out with me, and don't miss out on the next dark, strange, true, macabre mystery story that I bring to the channel by hitting the bell. Get the notifications. But that's it for King Pigley. I'm out of here. And I will see you guys in the next video.